Because so many times, if you have a woman who is instrumental and agentic, competitive, strong, decisive, she's been led to believe that she has a sexual identity problem. Or if you have a man who's gentle and kind and sensitive to the feelings of others, he's been led to believe, well, because you're not like the most, then you must have a gender identity issue.
Welcome to The Plunge with Derek Holzer. We now continue my conversation with Dr. Don Lichi, The Soul of Psychology, Part 2. Before we jump into that, I just want to take a moment to commemorate that this marks 1 year since the Plunge podcast was inaugurated, and I'm so thankful to everyone who's been a part of it, to all the guests who have provided tremendous insight and inspiration, and to the continuingly increasing number of subscribers, both on Substack, YouTube, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. I know I've got to catch up on the Spotify side, but anyway, this started 1 year ago as an idea to curate conversations that would span the intersection of theology, philosophy, and culture, and find the best in humanity, and then share it with the world. The goal is to continue doing this for a decade. So 9 more years to go, 1 down. Thank you all for being a part of it. And we now continue with Dr. Don Lichi, The Soul of Psychology. Let's dive in. Well, I'd love to transition a little bit to the personality and interpersonal relationships or intimacy. Yeah. So I'm curious about, and maybe it ties to the Holland Code, maybe there'd be another metric that you would want to use, just how a person's identity and how that influences their relationship with others.
Perfect. Beautiful. So one of the things that I have been very curious about is what sometimes it's called, some people use the term masculine, feminine, and you can get into a lot of trouble by just sticking sometimes to those things, because masculine almost always is associated with men and feminine is almost always associated with women. And thank God for many of the books that are out there. Men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and men are like waffles and women are like, they're cute books and they sell lots of copies. And even, our dear friend that wrote Love and Respect, he'd say, yeah, well, because the Bible says that men want to be respected and women want to be loved. But then I step back and say, well, do you know any women that want to be respected? Yeah. Do you know any men that want to be loved? Oh, yeah, that's true. And and
right.
And I did a study years ago, and that actually became my doctoral dissertation, where I looked at beyond gender, and I looked at gender-related personality traits, and found that there are some actual better terms to use. Because I'll give you an example of why that would be important, Derek. I hope this is okay to go to your, let's say you go to a men's conference. And you got this room full of 500 men, and you get, a lot of guys showing up with their plaid shirts and blue jeans and ball caps and beards, and they've got all the tools up there and the ladders, and they've got the power tools, and they're beating their chest and things like that. And they say, well, and then somehow it's gotten to be, okay, now this is the man, this is how he is. And men are thinkers and women are feelers, and you kind of get in all those stereotypes, right? And I look around that room and I think, well, probably for about 80% of the guys in here, you're 100% right. But for about 20% of the guys in this room, you're 100% wrong, because that's not them. And a lot of these situations occur where you don't fit the mold, so to speak. And as I go around the country, talk to leaders and talk to pastors and talk to laypersons and graduate classes, on, and I start to share about gender-related personality traits, all of a sudden, for many cases, the lights turn on. And so there's actually some better terminology that's used, and I'd like to just share them with the listeners if that's okay. And one of them is called Agentic, Agentic, instrumental. And I'm going to shift my light here just a little bit. That's a little bit more useful.
That's fine.
It'd be Agentic, instrumental. And these are traits. Let me read some of these traits. Confident. Do you know any men that are confident? Yeah. Do you know any women that are confident? Yeah. Active, competitive, decisive, never gives up, self-confident, stands up under pressure. Do you know men that do that? Yeah. Do you know women that do all that? Oh, yeah, that's true. Well, we would call that an agentic instrumental person. That's a positive trait. And by the way, this is all through the research that I've done, and these are actually instruments that measure this. So you would say, well, that you're describing a typical man, right? Yeah, well, in some cases, but there are a lot of women that are fitting this category. And the other one that I use is called expressive, communal, and affiliative. Expressive, communal, affiliative. So here's some of the traits. For example, emotional. Do you know any women that are emotional? Yeah. Do you know any men that are emotional? Yeah. How about devoted to other people? Gentle, helpful, kind, aware of feelings of other people, understanding of others, warm. Do you know any women that are like that? Oh, yeah, everyone's going to say. Do you know any men that are like that? Yeah. And then I really hammer it home. I say, well, let's talk about Jesus for just a moment. It is said of Jesus that a smoldering wick he would not snuff out, and a bruised reed he will not break off. He was so gentle that a wick that was just on the very end of life, he was not going to snuff it out. And a bruised reed that was just beaten up by life, he wasn't going to break off. And children found him so endearing that they just climbed all over him like a jungle gym. And yet, he was fierce. He was agentic and instrumental when he needed to be. He drove the money changers out of the temple when they were ripping people off. And he did it with a whip, and he overturned the tables. And Jesus was this amazing combination of the agentic instrumental and the communal affiliative. And we move away from some of that older terminology. And I've had every single time I've talked about gender identity and sexual identity in these terms, which is based upon research. Every time, Derek, someone comes up afterwards, oftentimes with tears in their eyes, and they will say, finally, someone gets me. Because so many times, if you have a woman who is instrumental and agentic, competitive, strong, decisive, she's been led to believe that she has a sexual identity problem. Or if you have a man who's gentle and kind and sensitive to the feelings of others, he's been led to believe, well, because you're not like the most, then you must have a gender identity issue. And what I'm trying to help people say is, you know what? God has created us with our personalities. And there is such a uniqueness of your personality that there is an expression of Christ through you that is not duplicated by anyone else. I'll say that again.
Agreed.
Your uniqueness of your personality, and I say that to every listener, is so unique based upon your family of origin, your personality, your temperament, whether you are more expressive and affiliative or maybe you're more agentic and instrumental. But there's an expression of Christ through you that's not duplicated by anyone else. And God chooses to work through people for his goodness and glory.
That's for sure. Well, as one of the 20% of the guys who would not be too enthusiastic about power tools and flannel and all the rest, I appreciate it.
But you bring a lot of beauty to this world. You're creative, you're artistic, you're a writer, a poet. Your writings have been very inspirational to me, Derek, and I'm hoping that many people will get a hold of those and read them and be
Thank
blessed
you.
by them.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I'm curious now, with respect to those terms that you just outlined as
Yeah.
part of your research and your dissertation, how then do is it beneficial? I'm sure it is, but I'll ask the question. How does that play a part in a person's self-assessment and perhaps their partner or friend or colleague, whomever it is that they're interacting with, to better understand and appreciate each other?
Yeah. I would say that in most cases, if a person can really grab an understanding of some of these dynamics of their personality and radically say, you know what, God did not make a single mistake when He gave me the interests and the personality that I have. Now you can put it on the Holland Code, more realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, conventional. You can also look at it in terms of, am I more expressive and communal? Am I more instrumental and angelic, or some mix of both? And as we see scripturally, Jesus was obviously a mix of both. And, He came to us as a man, but He was gentle and lowly. And yet He's also going to come back as a fierce ruler. I mean, he was the epitome of the warrior shepherd. That's the dynamic. The tough and the tender, the lion and the lamb. And you get the idea, the motifs that are used that way. And those are all said of Christ. He's the lion and the lamb. He's the Alpha and the Omega. He's the first and the last. He's the gentle Savior, and He's also the fierce warrior. And there's a lot we can learn from that. So how does that play out in our life now? Well, it means that you kind of get to know who you are. And I think if a person would literally, Derek, put themselves before God and say, you know what, I'm going to trust that God is smart. Not just good, not just holy, but God is He's brilliant, like brilliant. I mean, He knows more about the stock market than Louis Rukeyser. He knows more about computers than Bill Gates. He knows more about, He knows more about rockets than Elon Musk,
Mm-hmm.
He knows more
Right.
about these. He knows us, and He wants to love us, have a relationship that's unbroken, and He wants to work through us, and He's created us the way that He's created us. And if once we get to see that, know that, accept that, embrace that, and continue to place ourselves before God, that's like the reasonable thing to do.
It's good. Okay, so now we encounter a situation. We're going to get nitty gritty here,
Yeah,
practical. How someone has violated trust on both sides. However it shakes out. How is trust restored, and how does someone who has broken trust navigate the self-doubt? Or sorry, a person who has had the trust broken, they have their own self-doubt that may arise as a consequence of another's behavior. I threw a lot at you there, so.
No, it's good. And I think there are a few things in life that are more reflective of the very nature of God than the fact that God just keeps coming at us. It's that the Hebrew word chesed, it's that everlasting love, that constant. And yet, I just think that there's a sense, Derek, where there's a broken relationship. There's a brokenness of trust. We've gone to Stupidville, as I might say, and we come out and it's like, okay, well, I've been there. I'm not living there now, but I'm not there. But I want to get back into good graces. How does that restoration of relationship take place? I think that's what you're asking, and it's a dual thing. Forgiveness is a big part. Forgiveness is an act. It's a decision. It's a conscious act of the will that delivers the forgiven from anger and pain, and delivers the forgiver from guilt and shame. It doesn't have to be given to be received or received to be given. But when forgiveness is both given and received, there's the potential for restoration of a relationship. Sometimes it doesn't happen. but there's the potential for it to happen. And with a person that has broken the trust, that person comes to terms with, I violated a relationship, and I want you to know that I am genuinely sorry. And I'm not just sorry that I got caught, but I'm really sorry from the deep inside, because I recognize that I have wounded our relationship. And I'm determined to re-earn your trust over time. And I think forgiveness it's a process, it's an act. It's also a state of being over time. And the person that's broken the trust, it's incumbent upon them over time to rebuild that trust. And I'd never say, I don't expect people to be perfect, but I expect them to move ahead and make amends where they can. And then the person that has been wounded, typically they're going to have to be challenged to say, at what point do you keep bringing up the past of the other person? Because that person that's the violator is always wondering, is this always going to be thrown up in my face? Am I always going to be reminded of what I did? And the person that's the forgiving person is wondering, if I forgive too quickly, am I going to be taken for a fool? And so it's a dynamic on both parts. And the person that's broken the trust, I think, should oftentimes say, at least at the beginning, when I think about what I've done and I think about the pain that it's caused you and our relationship, I want you to know I really, truly am sorry. And I'm making amends, and my life has changed, and it's changing. And the person that was violated, the person that needs, they will come back and say, this has been hard, it's honest, it's wounding, but I am determined that I'm not going to keep rubbing your face into your past. And then, with that determination, maybe some good supports in their life, they can make it and they can thrive. And the point, when my back broke with the cancer, Derek, my L5 just disintegrated from the cancer. And they put it back. They went in and they put some plastic around it and cement around it. And the doctor said, Don, what I have to tell you now is that bone in your body that was the weakest part of your body is now the strongest part of your body. So you may break other bones in your body. You'll never break this bone again, because this is now the strongest bone of your body. And I believe that once forgiveness is given, it's received, hard work is done to reconcile over time, and trust is rebuilt, it's very unlikely that you'll ever go back to that pain point again. That's hopefully is a word of encouragement to your listeners.
Yeah, well, it certainly is to me. Along those lines, one of the things that I think leads to a violation of trust is a breakdown in communication between the two parties. At some point, either it's never been a proper, sort of transparency of communication, or it's broken down. And I'm curious, in terms of suggestions that you might have for how to discuss a person's honest feelings without fear of shame or reprisal, because I think that's a real valid situation.
It is, yeah, it really is. And I would say fear is almost like it gives birth to hiding, and it gives birth to secrecy, and it makes it easier and easier not to have that level of communication. And, I think at the very beginning of that kind of communication, Derek, I think you can say, look, I do want to share some things with you about what I've been thinking and feeling about myself and our relationship and how it's going. But I also want you to know that I really fear that because of your reaction you may have. And I would like to know that you really want me to be open and honest in our relationship. And by the way, in counseling or spiritual direction, that's one of the very first things I always ask people. I said, look, the only thing I'm asking is just be open and honest. That's all I ask. Be open and honest. And if then there's we've had a breakdown in our relationship, our communication, our sex life, our intimacy, our trust, just feeling honored and respected in our relationship, I feel like there's been such a breakdown, and I'm in pain. And I just want you to know that I'm in pain. And I'm not asking you to fix me, but you can certainly help create the conditions where I will feel a whole lot better about our relationship. And I think that's where some wisdom comes in, maybe a third person to actually teach some of those skills. And then you come alongside and say, all right, I really want to be able to share with you some of my deepest longings and fears. And I also would like you to know that it's really nice when you respond to my initiation and that we develop that. I mean, the whole idea of intimacy comes from a Latin word inimus, which means no barriers. There's no blocks in the way. And, and you can say, I really want to have an intimate relationship with you, but there's blocks in the way. There's barriers in the way, fear. And there can be any number of things that block our communication. And again, I go back to that seamless interaction, the give and take, the back and forth. And how can we live in this relationship successfully and really be open and honest with one another and really make it our priority to create for each other the conditions, to create for one another the conditions whereby each of us will better fulfill God's intended purpose and to become better than we could have ever become alone. That's an ongoing process, right?
Right.
How can I be in your life? How can you be in my life intentionally over time so that we both can better fulfill God's intended purpose to be better together than we could have ever been alone?
Yeah.
That's true intimacy.
Yeah.
But push on
okay,
a little bit more. Get more detail. That's
yeah.
good.
Well, one of the things that's at least this is my own experience, and so I like to think it might be shared by others. And this is particularly within a specific Christian context.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that fear of being honest, of expressing thoughts and feelings. And if you've come of age in a culture that repressed anything having to do with normal physical sexuality, right? The development of hormones, all the things that happens in our bodies. But because it is so taboo in certain Christian circles, that bleeds into our adult life and our relationship, our marriage. And, you know, it can show up seemingly out of the blue, but it's really a manifestation of something that has been built in long before we met the person we love. And I'm curious, in those circumstances, A, what kind of counsel do you provide, and B, what kind of retraining can be done for a person to feel comfortable?
That's such an important question. And you're right. That's probably going to be a question that many of the listeners are going to deal with. Just remember that when you come into a relationship, you come in with a full complement of life. You've had your generational family of origin, birth order, personality, choices you've made, all of those dynamics, the you messages of your childhood from the big people in your life that became the I messages of your adulthood. And we bring all of that into a new relationship, and the person that you are in the relationship has had all of that accumulation as well. And then you get married. Like, go figure. Of course it's going to be difficult. I mean, when the scripture says great is the mystery of marriage, that's the understatement of the year. It's a mystery. How can two people with these very divergent backgrounds actually live together in marriage? That is a miracle. It's a miracle. And the fact that anybody can actually make it is a miracle. I mean, we've actually had people that come to Emerge, and they say, well, we've been married 20 years and we've never had a fight. We just look at them and say, you probably haven't done anything else very interesting either. And the fact is that of course you're going to have these. I mean, you're drawn to each other. Oftentimes that person is different to complement you, but then we spend usually the first 7 years trying to change that other person into our own image. That's the one thing. And then there's all these expectations about sexuality and frequency and types of, how we express our sexuality towards each other. And, everything from the clashing of personalities. I mean, it's amazing to me that couples make it in the first place, but it can be done. It really can. And I have found that if a couple, again, I'm going to go back to what we talked about at the very beginning, these core essential beliefs. Do we really believe God? Do we believe that God is? That's a pretty crucial point. And I have found this, Derek, that if a couple will say, we are two really broken people in many ways, we're imperfect, we're flawed, we have dealt through life, and we've come together and we really want to be married. Okay, that's a good thing. So we are going to start in our relationship, we're going to bond our marriage to God. And God has created us to be bonded to the sources of our pleasure. We can talk about that in a minute. So if a couple, if they say, all right, we're going to actually pray. I mean, that's one of the hardest things. That's actually harder in some cases than having sex together, is actually praying together because you're really vulnerable. So let's pray together. And then the second thing is, let's really work at our intimate life. And I encourage couples not to let more than 3 days go by before they have significant skin-to-skin contact. That doesn't always have to be intercourse. It can be, but just holding, touching, caressing, rubbing, scratching, just squeezing, embracing, just that whole skin-to-skin. There's so much that goes on neurologically and in the bonding process that is so vitally important. And I just say, make it a 3-day rule. Just don't go more than 3 days without having significant skin-to-skin contact. And then thirdly, enjoy life together, play together, and do things together alongside where you develop an interdependent relationship. We work alongside, we weed together, we rake leaves together, we maybe wallpaper together is a little stretch, but you get the idea.
Sure.
But hear me on this, Derek. This is a very important point. I have worked with, probably right now, 52,000 hours of clinical work, 52,000 over these years. And I have never seen, not one single time, ever, a marriage that ends in divorce if those three things are in place. If a couple will pray together and lay together and play together, they'll stay together. I've never seen an exception. And that's an easy thing to remember. But when I work with couples, it's typically one or two of those is missing. Is they, all right, well, are you praying, laying, or playing together? No, not quite.
Yeah,
but those are really important. Those are bonding experiences. And so that there's a lot to be said theologically, but there's a lot to be said neurologically, biologically, psychologically for that bonding to take place. And that's, you can say that to anybody.
Yeah, well, I want to pause for a second. I guess I'm curious if we can discuss the neurological, biological, psychological components of that. But then I'd love, actually, if you're okay with it, to finish this conversation, if you're willing or have the wherewithal, to provide some commentary more broadly, culturally, on where we're at with respect to marriage. And
thank you.
The era of the divorces, the era of not marrying, and the era of waiting to marry, which we're in now, relative to history.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely. So ask away, or I'll
Okay.
start babbling,
Yeah.
but
So,
yeah.
so staying within the context of that question we just concluded, just maybe some of the examples neurologically,
Hmm.
biologically, physiologically that support the notion of the pray, lay, and play,
Okay,
so
good.
we can stay.
Yeah, let me start out by simply saying that when a child is born, they are born emotionally. In fact, they really express emotions in utero before they're born.
Wow.
They don't have words for those emotions. They just feel. And a baby, when they're born, they're either all joyful, or they're all sad, or they're all angry, you know, or they're all fearful. Those are the four core emotions:
Hmm.
anger, fear, joy, sadness. And the people that did the writing for Inside Out, the first one, they were just about right on with that. And it's true. Those are the four. And then what happens is that those emotions, and when a baby's born, is all of one of those emotions. And then, as time goes on, they learn to express and modulate those emotions through words. And language gives us a way to express the intensity of our emotions. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if I say, I am furious, or you maybe hear the president use an expletive because he's really angry, well, that's furious, angry. Or you can say, I'm a little bit off today. I'm really ticked off. I'm mild. It's all the same core emotion, but it's learning to express that at different levels of expression. Okay, does that make sense? So
Yes.
then, as time goes on, we recognize that also born within us is a desire to attach. Sometimes people call it the pleasure and pain concept, and it's true. We tend to bond to those things that bring us pleasure, and we tend to avoid things that bring us pain.
Mm-hmm.
So think about such things as, like, oh man, the diapering process. Okay, I mean, here you go, you get washed off on your genitals with a nice warm washcloth, and then you're powdered down, and then you're oiled, and you got this nice warm diaper. I mean, if you don't think that's pleasurable, you got to be dead.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
we will tend to want to repeat those things that give us pleasure. And within the brain, there is what we would call the pleasure center of the brain. Somewhere deep down inside what we call the amygdala, there's a pleasure center of the brain, and it's lit up when we experience pleasure. And the way that we're designed is that we will want to repeat those things that bring us pleasure. And there's only one pleasure center in the brain, period. And
Hmm.
so we will attach to those things that bring us pleasure, and we will tend to avoid things that bring us pain. So it's the pleasure pain principle. That makes sense, right? So as
Yep.
time
Yep.
goes on, and we hopefully have a relationship with God that brings us pleasure and delight. And let's say that God brings someone into our life that we actually have that deep, intimate pleasure with, hopefully to seek that bonding. And then just the joy of laughter and purpose and doing things together. So you get the idea of praying together, laying together, and playing together. Well, those things are bonding activities. And the more that those things are done, the tighter that bond will be. But if someone has had lots of experiences and they get bonded to all different kinds of things, or all kinds of attachments, or in my psychological world, we call it an attachment disorder, for example. And a lot of times people become attached to, you name it, fill in the blank. And it could be anything. We call them the big G, the little big G God, or there's lots of little gods that we attach to. And those are all
Would
things
you
that can lead us away from our divine purpose.
would you identify an unhealthy attachment as an addiction, or am I conflating things?
Yeah, no, an unhealthy attachment if it begins to take root in our life to the point where we lose actual control, that's when it crosses over the line to an addiction. But usually addictions, other than like some strong drugs that move from 0 to 100 instantly, but most addictions start out very slowly, or as Dallas Willard would say, most sheep go astray one nibble at a time. And
Sure.
but it usually starts out with just curiosity, I wonder, and then experimentation, and then regular use, and then it becomes embedded in our habit structure, and then if it doesn't stop, it can move into an addiction, and it can be anything that draws us, that lights up that pleasure center of the brain.
Right.
Like it even could be destructive. And people that are addicted to, you name it, they will keep going back to that, even though, I mean, no addiction is logical and no addiction is rational, but it's still powerful. And that's what I want the listeners to hear. Just because it's not rational or logical doesn't mean it's not powerful. It's really powerful.
Yeah.
And I've got issues with overeating, In our family background, we eat when we're happy, we eat when we're sad, we eat when we're together, we eat when we're alone. And, everything's an opportunity to eat. And it's one of those forgivable sins within our context,
Yeah.
And, I can be 400 pounds and condemning people that have a drink of alcohol, for example, And, but you understand that food addiction can be a food addiction. It doesn't make any sense. It's not rational, but it's real, and it can be very powerful, and it can actually consume and take over our lives.
Yeah. And would it be fair to say that those addictions, though they're not logical, may have a logic in the way in which they came about?
Yeah, starting out, we have this incredible way of rationalizing what we do and why we do. Even getting involved in, say, an unhealthy attachment. Well, it's like, it's not really happening in my relationship, and I'm entitled, and there's a deficit, and then, just goes on, and then we can find ourselves, as I say, taking the off-ramp to Stupidville very, slow but sure, right? And we've all done it. I mean, I've done it.
Absolutely.
And I just say, okay, well, get back on the main road here,
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm curious. I'd love to, if it's okay, Dr. Don, I would love
ask
to
anything about anything.
Well,
I always tell people, if I can't help you, at least you'll be confused at a much higher level.
Yeah, well, you provide much more clarity than confusion, that's for sure. I would like to, if it works for your schedule, for our second recording to be on the sexuality and your book on the broken windows of the soul.
I would love that. Oh, that'd be awesome.
I think that would work well together. And,
would love that.
Okay, then we'll plan on that. And I'd love to just spend the next 10, 15 minutes, whatever is comfortable. Okay. And I'd love your take from where you've sat all these years and the work you've done, the life you've lived, and maybe just open forum for you to comment on the state of the family over the last 50 years and what you perceive with respect to perhaps some hope for the future. I always want to end with hope, but just generally kind of the dynamics that have come to the surface and have led the culture, particularly in the American context, but with respect to relationships and marriage.
Thank you. I love the question, Derek, and it is so important. And you think about the fact that God has not bypassed significant relationships. It wasn't good for the man to be alone, so God created a woman, and they were naked. They were unashamed. They had unceasing relationship. They experienced true intimacy. Obviously, what we would call sin marred that, broke it. But the divine mandate that God originally gave was not eliminated because of the fall. The mandate was given before the fall. It wasn't negated by the fall. And when I think about relationships, they are probably what will give us the greatest pleasure, security, steadfastness, the greatest picture of what it means to be with somebody in a committed relationship. I like the term covenantal relationship, in which I make a promise to this person that I'm going to be with them. I'm going to provide, protect, defend, serve. I make a vow. I make a commitment. And when you make that vow, you do not know. Everybody wants the better. Everyone wants the healthy, and everyone wants, the
richer.
The richer. Yeah, we all want that. But because that's not guaranteed, we make the vow saying that there's a potential that we're going to get the worse, that we're going to get the poorer, that we're going to get the illness. I mean, that happened in our family with me, with my illness. I didn't see the cancer coming. I was training for a marathon. I didn't gone to doctors. I was healthy. I was training for my 12th marathon, and my back began to hurt. And a few days later, it just fell apart, and then they did the diagnosis. Well, you don't know that's going to happen when you get married. That's not the thing you think about when you say, I do. And I think one of the things I would say to your listeners is that to really think deeply, to do some introspection, and to do some deep pondering and reflection on what it really means to make a commitment and to take a vow. I work with first responders every week who have taken the promise, a vow. And a vow supersedes transitory emotions. I may not want to show up for my shift, but I do. I may not want to show up for my partner in my relationship, but I do. And I do that because I've made a vow, I've made a promise, I've made a commitment. And I think that we have people all around this country that are not public figures. They just show up. They do their duty. They show up, they work hard, they provide, they do the best they can to be a decent spouse. They try to be a good parent to their kids. I think that probably speaks to the vast majority of your listeners. And to you, I just say, you're kind of what I call the unsung heroes. You may not ever get great recognition on this side of eternity, but you show up, you do your duty, you do your job, and you do it to the best of your ability. And you say, I've made a commitment, I've made a vow, and that's called character. That's character, and you're going to face difficulties. It's predictable. And so what will you do during that time? Are you going to quit, ring the bell, drop out, run away? Or are you going to say, yeah, this is a really hard time right now. We're going through a rough stretch in our marriage. We have a child that's a prodigal. We're having difficulty with our finances. We're having difficulty with our health. And we don't know any of those things when we sign on. But that's why you sign on. And that's the thing I would want to encourage the listeners, is when you make that promise, you make that vow, that you continue to show up, follow up, pay attention to details, do your duty, and you will see that in the vast majority of cases, you're going to find out that really turns out quite well.
Do you have any thoughts for the younger generation who have experienced broken homes and disillusionment and all sorts of challenges with respect to what we would have called, sort of the promise of society if you do X, Y, and Z, you'll achieve
Right.
a desired outcome. There's a fair bit of apathy
Mm-hmm.
and a disillusionment, and so I'm curious as to encouraging those who feel like it's not worth the effort, why it is worth the effort.
I think it's a very strong and existential question, isn't it? Like, what's the point of my life? What's the purpose? Does my life have value? Does it have meaning? And this goes back to some of the work, that was written about by Viktor Frankl when he said, I have to survive this prison camp because I have to tell my story. That gave meaning.
For those who don't know, Dr. Don, would you
Yeah.
illuminate a little bit on Viktor Frankl?
Yeah, Viktor Frankl was a Jewish psychiatrist. He was imprisoned in the Nazi prison camp. And he found that people who had a why for their life were the ones that tended to survive. Those that could make it. And they had the why for their life. And out of that, he began to see people that thrived and made it, and those that just gave up and quit and died. And he found it really came down to that essential. It was all the external things were taken away, and horrible situation, horrible, unspeakable. But somewhere deep inside of them, they had a reason, a purpose for their life. My life has meaning, and out of that, he began to write after he was released from the prison camp, developed a whole type of therapy called logotherapy, of meaning, a purpose. And he really wrote in this famous book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he just found, and he said, if you have a why, you can do the what. And I would challenge our young people that are listening to this, go deep into that inner recesses of your life and begin to even ask God, say, Lord, if you want to pray and ask God, what do you have for me? What's the purpose of my life? What's my why? Why am I here? Why am I taking up space? Why am I using the oxygen on this world? What's the point of it? Does my life matter? And the fact is, it really does matter. And your life means something. And you discover that. Yes, you can talk about personality and traits and background, and there's been hurt and woundedness, no doubt. If some of that is you carry in, you're just going to have to work to get past your past so that you can get on with your future rather than, and I tell people, look, it's hard to write the new chapters of your life if you're only reading the last one. And sometimes I say to people, don't look back unless you're intending to go there. You have a history, every one of us do. And that history can be painful at times, from which much of that we need healing. But move on in your life. Look forward. You don't need to look back. Get on with your life. Get on with the sense that your life really matters. There's a uniqueness of your life that's not duplicated by anyone else. Find that why of your life, and then get on with the what of how you can live your life.
Perfect. I think that's a great way to conclude our conversation for this time.
Thank you, Derek, for the opportunity. I tell you what, we covered a lot tonight. That's a lot to go through. And I'm so grateful for the opportunity, and just I think for the listeners, just to recognize that you do have a place in God's universe, in this world, that you are lovable, that you're valuable, that you're forgivable, that you're changeable, that you're never alone. You have a unique personality, and there's an expression of Christ through you that's not duplicated by anyone else. Relationships are hard, but they're worth it. And make sure that you keep your strong attachments to the one that loves you the most.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much, Dr. Don. Today's episode of The Plunge is sponsored not by a word, but by a collection of words strung together in a beautiful fashion. That's right, a poem. For the second year of The Plunge, the demand has grown from our endorsement deals to move beyond mere words and to move into the higher realm, and that is poetry. And so, moving forward, at least for the next 52 episodes, we will be sponsored by a select poem, and perhaps we'll have guest readers for those poems, because I know you're tired of listening to my voice. But for now, today's episode is sponsored by the poem A Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Tell me not in mournful numbers, life is but an empty dream, for the soul is dead that slumbers, and things are not what they seem. Life is real, life is earnest, and the grave is not its goal. Dust thou art, to dust returnest, was never spoken of the soul. Not enjoyment and not sorrow is our destined end or way, but to act that each tomorrow find us farther than today. Art is long, and time is fleeting, and our hearts, though stout and brave, still like muffled drums are beating funeral marches to the grave. In the world's broad field of battle, in the bivouac of life, be not like dumb driven cattle. Be a hero in the strife. Trust no future, however pleasant. Let the dead past bury its dead. Act in the living present, heart within and God overhead. Lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing leave behind us footprints on the sands of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing o'er life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing, shall take heart again. Let us then be up and doing with a heart for any fate. Still achieving, still pursuing, learn to labor and to wait. A Psalm of Life by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Thank you, Henry. Thank you for your sponsorship with that beautiful poem and reminder.